It's my pleasure to welcome you to an annual event that is co-sponsored by the New York chapter of Noble and John Jay College of Criminal Justice to honor the legacy and life of Lloyd George Seeley, who at the time of his untimely death was a founder of Noble and a senior faculty member here at the college. Before I begin, let me do some housekeeping. The restrooms are located outside to your right, to the common hallway. I ask that you now turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. And in case of emergency, the exits are straight ahead. I was going to say you could follow me, but because I'm going to know where to go. But in case of emergency, the exits are straight ahead and to your left to 59th Street or to your right to the main building lobby. It's my pleasure now to provide some background for you for the president of the college, Jeremy Travis. Jeremy Travis is the president of John Jay College of Criminal Justice at the City University of New York. Prior to his appointment, he served as a senior fellow in the Urban Institute's Justice Policy Center, where he launched a national research program focused on prisoner reentry into society. From 1994 to 2000, President Travis directed the National Institute of Justice, also known as NIJ, the research arm of the U.S. Department of Justice. Prior to his service in Washington, he was Deputy Commissioner for Legal Matters for the New York City Police Department from 1990 to 1994, a special advisor to then New York City Mayor Edward I. Koch from 1986 to 1989, and special counsel to the Police Commissioner of the NYPD from 1984 to 1986. Before joining city government, Mr. Travis spent a year as a law clerk to the then U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He began his career in criminal justice working as a legal services assistant for the Legal Aid Society, New York's indigent defense agency. He has taught courses on criminal justice, public policy, history, and law at Yale College, the New York University Wagner Graduate School of Public Service, New York Law School, and George Washington University. He has a JD from the New York University School of Law, an MPA from the New York University Wagner Graduate School of Public Service, a BA in American Studies from Yale College, and he is the author of numerous books, including But They All Come Back, Facing the Challenges of Prisoner Reentry, and also Prisoner Reentry and Crime in America in 2005. He has published numerous book chapters, articles, and monographs on constitutional law, and criminal justice policy. And before I bring him to say a few remarks, he's also a personal friend and mentor of mine and a friend of Noble, nationally and locally. I take this time now also to thank him publicly for serving as honorary chair of Noble's 2008 national conference that was held here in New York City. President Travis opened the college for the conference attendees and worked to provide faculty support and served as a moderator for a panel that covered a topic that is dear to his heart, prisoner reentry. I need to add that he opened the college and moderated this panel on a Sunday. No small feat for a person who works long hours, is a family man, and a world traveler. So please join me in welcoming the president of John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Mr. Jeremy Travis.
So good evening and welcome, everybody, to this annual event that we're very proud to host here at John Jay, which is a convening of people who are here to support Noble, a very important national institution, those who are here to honor the memory of Lloyd George Seeley, and those who are here to listen to words of wisdom and inspiration and insight from an important speaker in our field tonight, the Honorable Loretta Lynch. So I do want to offer some personal observations at the beginning, and it's pretty rare that I get to say this number of connections that I have to an event. We do lots of things here at John Jay, and I'm always proud to be the president who welcomes people to this remarkable institution and to invite people to be part of a vibrant community of 15,000 students and 400 plus full-time faculty and 600 plus adjunct faculty who think about these issues all the time. And so I encourage people to make this their intellectual home. But tonight is a special night because I have some connections, personal connections, deep connections to all of the reasons that we're here tonight. Let me talk first about Noble. As Greg mentioned, I have a John Jay connection to Noble, but what he didn't mention, but if you read between the lines, you'll see why I have a professional connection to Noble that goes back many years. I was brought into the NYPD by Benjamin Ward, who was a mentor of mine, very close friend, role model, and I'm still in touch with his daughter, Mary. I'm a very close connection to that family, and he's somebody I looked up to. And the year that he was 85 police commissioner was the year, 86 was the year that Noble came to New York, right? 85, somewhere around there. So years ago, and Tim Pearson remembers this, the big guy on the top floor of One Police Plaza said, there shall be a Noble conference in New York, and we're going to host it. And so I sat right outside his office. So I felt the reverberations of that roar from Ben Ward, and was assigned to be the liaison to Noble, along with a lot of other people, to make sure that it happened. And it was a great event that really showcased the city and showcased the NYPD. But it was part of the, in my experience, part of the maturation of Noble. So I have that long-standing connection to Noble, and even when I was at NIJ and in other iterations, was able to reconnect with this important organization that brings together the thought leaders in law enforcement within the African-American leadership contingent of law enforcement around critical issues. And this is an important group for our country that have come together. The second connection, of course, is to Lloyd Seeley. Now, this is not a man that I knew, but a man who everybody knew, who did any sort of work in policing in New York. And when I came to John Jay, I realized what a central role he had played here in the creation of this institution, and really an inspirational role to students and faculty, and his legacy is memorialized in our faculty, in our library, which is named after him. So it's nice to have a chance to honor one of the trailblazers in this profession. And then finally, we're welcoming tonight a friend and a colleague, professional acquaintance, Loretta Lynch, who when I was at NIJ was one of the key thought leaders, again to use that phrase, as U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District, and was somebody that Janet Reno turned to, somebody that Eric Holder, when he was deputy, and now Attorney General, turned to. And so on one level I was surprised, on another level I was delighted when she was brought back into public service from law practice to be once again the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District. This is somebody who has been on the front line with great wisdom and tenacity, so we're delighted to have Ms. Lynch here as our speaker. So enough from me, except to make an apology, which is at some point I'm going to disappear and go home because, as Greg said, long nights, sometimes weekends, and any time I can be home before my wife is a good night. So I'm going to be there and getting ready for dinner. So I'll disappear a little early. But thanks all for coming, and thanks to Loretta.
Thank you, President Travis. It's my pleasure now to introduce the president of the New York chapter of Noble. Assistant Chief Gerald Nelson is a 38-year veteran of the New York City Police Department, currently serving as the Assistant Chief, two-star Chief, and Commanding Officer of Patrol Borough Brooklyn North. Noble has 56 chapters across the country, in the Virgin Islands and in the UK, and Chief Nelson has served for the past 3 years as president of the New York chapter, the largest chapter in Noble. Please join me in welcoming the president of the New York chapter, Gerald Nelson.
Thank you, Greg. And listening to the president, first, thank you, President and John Jay, for joining us and hosting this wonderful occasion as we honor and keep the legacy alive of Lloyd Seeley. But listening to you speak, you brought back memories, because I was a sergeant at the time when Ben Ward was making sure that the first Noble conference that came to New York was a resounding success. So thinking back all those years, we worked hard, and it was a tremendous success. Lloyd Seeley is someone that is very, very special to me because I like to think I'm trying my best to live up to what he stood for and following his footsteps. I'm lucky enough to be a commanding officer of Brooklyn North, a command where he was the first in history to be a chief inspector within the NYPD. And what was his command? My command, Brooklyn North. That is truly an honor. each year we try to bring you dynamic speakers, and I know we've done the same thing this year. We have a great speaker with a wonderful message that she's going to give us. So be patient. You're going to hear her soon and listen to her message. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for sharing this wonderful occasion with us.
Thank you, President Nelson. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. Loretta E. Lynch was appointed by President Barack Obama, and on May 3rd, 2010, took the oath of office as United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York from Chief United States District Judge Raymond J. Deary. In that capacity, she is responsible for overseeing all federal and civil investigations and cases in Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, as well as Nassau and Suffolk counties on Long Island. She supervises a staff of approximately 170 attorneys and 150 support personnel. Before joining the United States Attorney's Office in 1990, Ms. Lynch practiced law as a litigation associate for a leading New York-based firm. She began her career in the Eastern District prosecuting narcotics and violent crime cases. Ms. Lynch served as chief of the Long Island office from 1994 to 1998, and after serving as the chief of general crimes and as chief of intake and arraignments for the district in the Long Island office, she prosecuted white-collar crime and public corruption cases and was a lead prosecutor in a series of trials involving allegations of public corruption in the Long Island town of Brookhaven. Ms. Lynch also served as the district chief assistant, where she was a member of the trial team in United States versus Volpe et al., a 5-week civil rights case involving a sexual assault by uniformed New York City police officers upon Haitian immigrant Abner Louima. Ms. Lynch was appointed by President William Jefferson Clinton as United States Attorney for the U.S. Eastern District of New York, serving from 1999 to 2001. While United States Attorney, Ms. Lynch was a member of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee, serving as co-chair of the White Collar Crime Subcommittee. She also was a frequent instructor for the Department of Justice in their criminal trial advocacy program and served as an adjunct professor at St. John University's School of Law. Before returning to the office as U.S. Attorney in 2010, Ms. Lynch was a partner in the New York office of Hogan and Hartson, LLP, and was a member of the firm's litigation group. Her practice focused on commercial litigation, white-collar criminal defense, and corporate compliance issues. While at Hogan, Ms. Lynch also served as special counsel to the prosecutor of the ICTR and conducted a special investigation into the allegations of witness tampering and false testimony at the tribunal. Ms. Lynch received her A.B. cum laude from Harvard College in 1981. She received her J.D. from Harvard Law School in 1984, where she was an advisor to the first-year moot court competition and a member of the Legal Aid Bureau and Harvard Black Law Student Association. I want to introduce you now to a friend to the college, a friend to Noble, and a foe to those who choose to commit crimes in the Eastern District of New York. The Honorable Loretta Lynch.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for that wonderful and warm introduction. And thank you all for having me as this year's Lloyd Seeley Lecture presenter. I have to say that it's an honor to be here. First of all, John Jay is not only an exciting institution, an institution that's near and dear to my heart, that's provided help and support to many friends of mine who are graduates, some of my former trial partners, and some of my coworkers who are here tonight as well. I'm very, very proud of their accomplishments. But I'm also extremely proud to be here on behalf of Noble, an organization that has always supported me in my career in law enforcement throughout the years. When I was a young assistant U.S. attorney, getting to know people in this city, in the law enforcement community, and when I became U.S. attorney last time and had to deal with some of the more challenging cases involving our community's relationship with the police department, Noble was always supportive, always helpful, always there to lend not only an ear but a hand. And so I count this organization as a friend and greatly, greatly appreciate the chance to speak to you tonight. In particular, to honor a person such as Lloyd George Seeley. who really was a legend in law enforcement, even to those of us who were not privileged enough to know him. And I want to talk a little bit about where we are and some of the things that I see my second time around. You could call me a recidivist. I prefer to think of myself as recycled or green in the position, but it has been an extraordinary ride both times, and I am greatly appreciative and frankly delighted to be in this administration and to have the opportunity to work with this Attorney General and this President is truly something that I did not think I would see. And so it's been quite a blessing, actually. But we're actually here tonight at another fascinating time, a very fascinating time in American policing. And those of you who are in the field know that new technologies have really, changed the way in which we do business. From the 80s and 90s, when I was a young assistant, to now, we have new technologies. We have cameras on every corner, facial recognition technology. Thanks so much. It's no longer merely imagined in the movies. The forensic tools of CSI, which my juries used to always ask me about. My favorite one was, why were there no fingerprints on the cocaine? Try and explain that one. But the forensic tools of CSI are increasingly coming true in our own law enforcement fields. And yet I submit to you that the real future of law enforcement lies where it's always been, in the neighborhoods and the communities of our cities, and in the community policing model that was espoused by, among others, this lecture's namesake, Lloyd George Seeley. And as this audience contains so many members and future members of that august organization, Noble, as well as those who study policing trends, I just want to offer a few thoughts tonight on the role of minority law enforcement officers in community policing. Now, of course, the role of minority law enforcement officers in overall policing is a fascinating one, and one which I think many of us in this room have had occasion to see on a personal level. And this is in no small part, as we know, because the minority community itself often has had a conflicted relationship with law enforcement. And this is primarily because we are so often perceived to be its targets, and often perceived to be the only targets, both by ourselves and by others. I recall an experience I had when I was a young lawyer. I was a young narcotics prosecutor, and I was selecting a jury for a trial in the courthouse in Brooklyn. I was prosecuting 5 young men from the Staten Island area that attempted to buy cocaine from an informant for the DEA. And during the process, many of you have seen it, the jurors are asked the general questions by the judge, anything you've seen or heard about the case that might affect you, might influence your ability to be fair and impartial. And have you read anything, seen anything? And, you know, people raise different things about their personal experiences. One juror in particular raised her hand, and she asked to speak up at the sidebar. So we went up to meet with the judge and this juror, myself, 5 defense lawyers. It's myself, my paralegal was a young African-American man, and we were pretty much the only African-Americans in the courtroom on that day. And so we're speaking to the juror, and the judge inquires very kindly, is there something that might affect your ability to be fair? And she said, well, yes, there is. And the judge says, well, what have you heard about the case, if anything? And she says, well, it isn't anything that I've heard, but it's what I've seen. And we were somewhat puzzled because the case really had gotten no publicity. And then she went on and she said, well, you know, I'm looking at the defendants, and they're all white. So, of course, we're all standing up at the sidebar, and we all turn around together. And yes, the defendants were all white, as they had been that morning. And so we look at the juror again, and she says, but Judge, you know, when I think of criminals, I don't think of white people. I think of black people or Hispanic people. And this is a judge that I'd never before seen speechless. And after a few moments, she said, well, she asked the juror, well, then, are you saying that you believe then that a white person cannot commit a crime? And the juror says, well, you know, I've never thought about crime in those terms, but I don't think so. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you've never heard of the mafia. You've never heard of the savings and loan crew. You've never heard of white-collar crime. But that was not her world view. That was not her perspective. And needless to say, she was excused. And of course, as she left, she turned to me and said, I'm so sorry I had to say what I said. And I said, well, thank you for your honesty. I'd rather know than not know. I wasn't going back to the MCC at night, so I was fine. But But you realize that those are the attitudes that are out there in our community, in the world, and they impact upon those members of our community and sometimes members of our family and our friends who get caught up in the criminal justice system and can find themselves on the other side of that V. And those of us who have chosen law enforcement as a career, we often bear the brunt of our community's dual perception of the field. On the one hand, we bear the weight of years of unfulfilled expectations, and we are the recipients of a great deal of support. I myself have always appreciated that. But our choice is not always welcomed. And I recall another incident years ago when I was going to middle school in Harlem with a friend of mine, a friend of Noble and John Jay, a friend I'm delighted to see here tonight, Lou Rice. And Lou would spend time when he was head of DEA here in New York speaking to young minority students about what DEA did and about the harms of narcotics trafficking and the very real ramifications of that. And usually it went well. This night, we were taking questions from a group of students. I don't know if you remember this young man, Lou, who at one point looked up and said, raised his hand, and people are asking very revealing questions, you know, about how to get out of certain situations and how do they handle a situation if a friend or family member has a problem. Just very, very deep questions. As one young man raised his hand, and Lou recognized him, and he said, well, I just want to know, how do you sleep at night locking up drug dealers? And I remember thinking, I want to hear the answer to this too. And then he looked at Lou and said, why are you even here? And without missing a beat, Lou said, I am here because the next time I lock up a crew of drug dealers, I don't want to see your face in the back of that car. So you see, our choice isn't always welcomed. We have to spend time explaining our choice. But I'm here to state that our involvement is essential to law enforcement. In fact, I submit to you that minority officers from all different backgrounds are uniquely qualified to deal with the multicultural and the multinational challenges of modern policing because we straddle more than one world every day. I'm reminded of the words of one of our own great thinkers, W.E.B. Du Bois, who spoke about the duality of the Black experience in his great work, The Souls of Black Folk. He said, one ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. Surely no one has before or after captured the peculiar burden of being Black in America than in those words written more than a century ago. But the unforeseen benefit of that internal struggle is a strength and a vision and a perspective that makes minority officers an asset to the challenges of policing in the modern world. And we see through the eyes of the minority officer and our impact on that role the true value of diversity, not to meet a quota, but to expand a worldview. Now, you think of many challenges when you think about modern urban law enforcement today. This city presents many of them, a microcosm, a laboratory right outside your door. I know this lecture podium has in the past been graced by police chiefs who have described for you the trends and changes in their cities. You've heard from social scientists discuss new uses for statistics and data. And of course, your own experience as those who both police and study New York City. Of course, in a post-9/11 world, we here in the New York area had the tremendous challenge of national security prevention and prosecution. Indeed, my own office is now a leader in this field. It's probably the biggest change in the portfolio that I've observed upon my return to the Eastern District. My terrorism lawyers are now national security lawyers, working with law enforcement, the military, and the intelligence community with the goal of stopping the next attack. Our practice is increasingly international in scope. Our trial docket is fascinating. We've had some amazing successes. I'm tremendously proud of the work that these young people do. We've prosecuted individuals who sought to blow up the fuel depots at JFK Airport, the individuals who sought to blow up the New York City subway system, individuals who traveled to the Middle East with the sole goal of joining al-Qaeda and killing American soldiers. These cases and these investigations are sensitive and complex. They're handled not just by my office, but by the New York City Police Department, the FBI, the Southern District of New York, our own DA's offices. They are an important part of modern law enforcement in New York. But these cases are not the biggest challenges we face, my friends. The biggest challenge is, once the case is over, how do we knit together a community that has often been torn apart by fear and suspicion? As we take steps to keep us all safe, how do we prevent the bonds of community from just unraveling around us and leaving us in many ways worse off than before? We can protect our city, but what kind of a city do we want to have? How do we restore and maintain trust in our efforts? Now, the relationship between law enforcement and the community ebbs and flows. I recall some of the darkest days. As you heard, I did work on the Louima case. And those were difficult days, my friends. I'm here to tell you, and I know those of you who were in New York at the time remember them. I watched the police department turn to community outreach to try and heal the rift that was exposed. And during my years out of office, I watched events unfold. I watched with great sadness the Sean Bell case and others. And now I've returned to the Eastern District of New York, only to see that my office is focusing among many other things, the Suffolk County Police Department's response to the brutal killing of an Hispanic immigrant. We're working with them in the Civil Rights Division in structuring how they interact with the minority community that they host. We've also had an NYPD officer recently plead guilty to the unauthorized stop and false arrest of yet another black man in this city. The furor over stop and frisk continues, and of course, we see the group that is currently on the outside looking in, our Arab and Muslim neighbors. Another major change in the practice that we have as part of my office and the Department of Justice Community Outreach Program, we've made it a priority to reach out to the Arab and Muslim community, particularly as we ramp up our terrorism investigations. We assure them that we will also protect their civil rights in this time of backlash and indiscriminate violence against those that are perceived of as the other. I've spent time meeting with imams, with citizens, with business people, with people who are Arab and Muslim, and those who are often perceived to be Arab and Muslim but are not, but face the same discriminations. And in my meetings with them, I have been struck by the similarity of their concerns really to all the groups with whom I speak, but particularly the similarity of their concerns to the black community. They want to be seen as people, as citizens. They want not to be stereotyped. They want not to be assumed to be a criminal, or in their case, a terrorist. They want their children to be safe. The list is so painfully familiar to those of us who've worked in this area for years. We need to be the bridge that Lloyd Seeley envisioned so many years ago, because we have saved nothing if we win all these cases and lose our communities. There is the perception among many of the groups with whom I am speaking that law enforcement has broken faith with them. They say that we either grew up here or came here, it doesn't matter, but we did what we're supposed to do. We've worked hard, we've studied, we've built a place for ourselves, only to be turned away by the people that we thought were going to protect us. And where faith has been broken, distrust and fear grow apace. We live in a time where, sadly, people still fear law enforcement. But we must also understand when people say that they fear the police, as bad as that is, what they are also expressing is the underlying fear that when they are confronted with the criminal element in our society, they will have no one to call upon to protect them. And that feeling of vulnerability, that feeling of helplessness, that feeling that there's no one on my side, there's no one I can call, is the worst feeling that we can inflict upon fellow members of our society. Well, the question obviously is, where do we go from here? More must be done to open the lines of communication and keep open those that have been built over the years. The community policing model provides an outstanding template for working on these issues. And as we all know, the NYPD's Community Affairs Bureau does an outstanding job of knitting together the various community groups and the officers that work with them. But our friend Philip Banks cannot do it all alone. And I suspect they too will soon be stretched by the budget cuts that plague us all. So my challenge to all of you here tonight, if those of us in this room do not personally know our community councils, get to know them. We have to encourage those who are marching on City Hall, and they're not marching without reason, to meet with law enforcement instead. These meetings must be at every level. They will be uncomfortable. They will be unpleasant. We will hear things that are difficult to hear. Our goal is to listen and to let our friends, our neighbors, our fellow Americans know that we are here for them as well and that we are listening to them. To the academics in this room, our challenge is we need more hands-on research projects focusing in real time on areas of conflict and new and innovative methods of dealing with those. We can look to community courts. We can look overseas to the model that often occurs in other countries as well of community reconciliation. You can also facilitate meetings, listening sessions, and positive interactions. Often academia can be the honest broker between the warring sides of law enforcement and the community. To the students who are here, your challenge is to study the real-life laboratory outside your door. Seek to understand all sides of the issues. That is why you are here. Expand your mind. Literally step in someone else's shoes and understand that when they talk about their pain, it will sound so familiar to you. The challenge to all of us is to look back on the life and the legacy of Lloyd Seeley. He believed that his function was to be a bridge between the community and the police, and he spent every day of his career making that happen. Our challenge is to bring that into the modern era, to be that bridge, to find that bridge, to walk across it, to take the hand of someone who feels left out and draw them over here with us. I want to thank you for inviting me here tonight. Thank you for your time and for your attention, and thank you for your commitment to this important goal.
As we thank you again, Your Honor, for your time and for your poignant words. As we spoke on the phone over the last few weeks, we prepped for this, and the one question she asked me, which is a question slash, I think, insisting, would there be a Q&A session? So with that, we have a microphone in the middle, and we're going to ask you if you can make it to the microphone, please, or we could have it passed around, might be easier. Is somebody available to do that? Thank you, Dr. Jones. I appreciate that. Thank you. So if you have any questions for the U.S. Attorney, thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. There you are. My name's Alice Labrie. I'm very happy to be here tonight and learn about Mr. Seeley. Just a quick ID and then my question. I'm Alice Labrie. I'm former U.S. Department of State Foreign Service in Turkey, Oman, Sweden, U.S. mission to the UN under Richard Holbrooke. I live in Harlem in Esplanade Gardens. And one last comment before I ask my question. I want to give a shout out to DI Inspector Catalina of the 32nd Precinct, where we received the most excellent care. He came to speak to us at Esplanade at one of our community board meetings, and he received a huge, huge applause. And I was almost touched to tears when an elderly man came up to him and shook his hand and said, "Thank you." That was really touching. My question is, security is a big issue with me, as with all of us in this room. I heard yesterday about David Kennedy of John Jay's program. I forgot the name of it, where he reaches out to the community, etc. But can you tell us, or anyone in the room, I mean, really, what can we do as a community? How can we help parents help their children?
Well, I have to tell you, this is an extremely important area. Just yesterday, my office effectuated the rearrest, I should say, of a teacher's aide in Brooklyn, whom we had initially arrested on possession of child pornography, and we later learned he had been producing child pornography. And so, fortunately, he had not been back to work at his school since the initial arrest, but it was an area of great concern to the school itself, to parents, to those children. And I think that there are a number of issues that confront young people today. I mean, every generation says it was so different, you know, when I was young. And since you now know when I came out of college and law school, you know how old I am. But I will tell you one of the biggest differences and one of the biggest challenges is the internet. And it is a concern to me and to those, all of us who deal with this area of child pornography and also child entrapment. It's a different kind of danger or risk. So when parents ask me that, one of the things I always say to them is be very involved in what your children are doing on their computer. Be intrusive, be annoying, be rude, demand their passwords. I'm very serious about this. Demand their passwords, and if you go on to either Facebook, used to be MySpace, but you know, my kids say that's passé now, so that's gone. But routinely check it. Check and see not only who's communicating with them and what they are saying, but check and see what kind of pictures are being sent back and forth on the online services. It can be more difficult to control our children's electronic devices. I have 2 teenagers now, and they live by text message. I mean, they're sitting side by side, texting each other. Laughter will break out. I say, what's so funny? He just told me a joke. I didn't hear a thing. So, you know, and they send pictures back and forth as well. You've heard of sexting. And it doesn't have to be as bad as that, but you still find children who don't understand the privacy line. So what I always tell parents or people who are close to young people is get very involved in their electronic lives and do not care if the children are annoyed with you for that. Because it is better they be mad at you and safe than be caught up in some of the things that are going on. I mean, children literally are being lured to meet adults. They are being abused, and it is really, the internet has made it a lot easier for people to hide. And if you are not involved in your child's computer life, you are really missing a huge area of exposure to them.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask, as a woman, what, even in this day and age, have you encountered as a female in such a high position of authority? Is it, I know it's very different from when you started off in law school, but do you still encounter issues of sexism or other types of opposition to your position in authority because of your gender?
I wouldn't say now, because usually if I'm dealing with someone, they're dealing with the office, and so they understand that I have a certain position and a certain authority there. It's always interesting when people don't know who you are, and I don't carry a sign, you know, whatever. And so people will come in the office and they'll be looking for the U.S. attorney, and they'll speak to me one way, and then when they realize that I'm the person they're looking for, it may change a little bit. But that happens. You know, I certainly had the experiences when I was a young lawyer of going to take a deposition and being mistaken for the court reporter. And I've had the experience that we've all had. When I was a young AUSA, I think there were 2 other black women in the office, but they were senior to me, so they weren't in court as often as I was. And there was one, in terms of federal defenders, there was one black woman who was a federal defender. She's now a judge on the 2nd Department, and of course we look nothing alike. But I would routinely go into court and have an agent who had been in my office drafting a warrant that morning say, "Oh, we're so glad to see you. We're waiting for you. Now that the defense is here, we can start." So I've definitely had that happen. I would say now, I think people sometimes will assume that you're going to have a certain view on things because you're a woman. I think they expect a certain amount of leniency or mercy from me because I'm a woman. And if you've ever met my mother, you should know that's not even in the cards. She's much tougher than I am. She's a retired school teacher, so she's seen it all. And so I think sometimes I get that a little bit from people who make a petition to me, and they think, and they want a lot of sympathy. And I have a lot of sympathy for people. I really do. Because I know life is hard. People find themselves caught up in things. But it doesn't usually sway my ultimate decisions.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kressler. I'm a librarian at the Lloyd Seeley Library here at John Jay. I'm also a historian, and 20, 30 years ago in New York, the crime rate was many times higher than it is today. And part of the reason why the crime rate has come down has been aggressive policing. And at the same time, some of the communities that have been made tangibly safer are complaining about aggressive police tactics. So if you can just address this difficult problem of how do you bring crime down without aggressive policing, or how do you control aggressive policing within civil liberties, take it away.
You know, I'd love to answer that, write a book, and win my Pulitzer, because you really have hit upon the most intractable issue, I think, in modern urban policing. Even now that the crime rate has gone down, there's still areas where it may spike, and you will see aggressive policing go in, and you'll see the same tensions that you're talking about. The best way that I could answer that is to describe a situation that I saw in my first time in office, and I've seen also to this in this time around, is we have a very active anti-gang practice, and we do a lot of work in the housing projects of Brooklyn and Queens. And you'll find pockets of these projects that have literally been taken over by gangs, and the hallways are shooting galleries, and people are in their apartments living in fear. So you do need aggressive policing. I find that people want aggressive policing if they, as a community, feel they are part of it. They don't want aggressive policing if they feel that it's being imposed upon them and they are a target, without any sort of discerning who's who there. And so the situations that I saw and that I've seen that have been successful, where we have done some very aggressive police work in conjunction with both DEA and NYPD working together, have been where we've enlisted community assistance in those difficult areas and made the community feel that we were there to literally help them, as opposed to a SWAT team coming in and we're going to sort it all out later. And then we get a very positive response. We get thank you letters from people saying, literally, thank you for making our housing projects safe again, letting our children go outside again. The other times that I've seen aggressive policing work are when it's coupled with a very strong police presence all the time. When the inspector is a known quantity in that particular area before a particular sweep or before a particular police action, because then residents also feel that the PD's invested in them, they become invested in the PD. And so if you've built a separate relationship aside and apart from the police action, then you can take those actions and have them be much more successful. Doesn't mean you still won't get the same frictions because of the nature of the work that we do. But those are the times that I've seen it be more successful than others. And I think it goes back to what I was trying to outline earlier, which is without that connection, without people feeling as if this is a law enforcement community that is here to help me, there's a break. And people will assume the worst. We've all seen it. You'll see an incident happen, and if you have a law enforcement background, you might understand how something may have occurred, how a shooting may have happened. You don't condone it, you don't know, but you can sort of see it. But the people in the community initially have a reaction of, why do you have to go and shoot that person? So, and it's a distance that's there, and you've got to close those gaps. I hope that's helpful.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Michelle Teje. I'm a member of Noble, also a student here in the graduate level, and actually, in fact, in Dr. Jones-Brown's class. And the example that you shared with us today of the potential juror and her ideology actually is represented in a book that we're reading now, The Condemnation of Blackness. And so my question, if you have an answer, would be how do we get people to recognize that crime happens in all races so that we don't have these type of stereotypical responses? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to address that. I think that it's not just having them recognize that crime occurs everywhere, which we try and do the standard methods of press releases and press conferences, but also I think community forums, letting people know of different crime threats, letting people know, for example, cybercrime now is a huge threat to everybody, and most of those perpetrators are not only white, but they're European, and they're often offshore. So, you know, we need to educate people about the various things that place them at risk. But I also think letting them see minorities in law enforcement is as effective, if not more effective. You know, I really do think that she thought I was the defendant at first. I really do think she thought that. And I think just by her face when I got up and walked to this, literally, to the sidebar, I think she just did not see it as a possibility that I was one of the lawyers. And it was a shock to her. And she was fine with it ultimately, because she got to go home. But, you know, I think they have to see people in different roles as well.
So good evening. Thank you for that inspiring talk. So I'm going to ask the opposite question of my student. I'm Dr. Dolores Jones-Brown from here at John Jay. How do you get people to understand that even among crime-ridden communities, that the criminals are the minority, not the majority, and so that we end up not having the kind of situation that my colleague raised about aggressive policing, where aggressive police are not discerning the innocent from the guilty?
Yeah. That's an excellent question, and I don't have the whole answer to it. I will tell you that my thought on it has always been that our whole community has to get much more aggressive itself in how we are portrayed, mostly in the media. That's one area, but that's, you know, sometimes it's Hollywood, it's television. But I find the local news, frankly, sets the agenda and sets the tone for a lot of debate and discussion in the city. It's television, it's editorials, you know, whether or not you feel that certain newspapers have a certain proclivity or not, you know, they all have different editors and editorial boards, but they are supposed to be mirroring the community. And I think that we have to do a much better job of forcing them to acknowledge positive things that are going on in our communities. And it can be, you know, building the relationship, even if it's with the black reporter or the black anchor, and getting things featured on TV. And there have been studies done, and I'm not sure if they're still doing them, when you look at the local evening news and the number of minutes that it contains, subtract the commercials, and see how many minutes are just purely violence. And in those minutes of, and it's usually the majority, and in those minutes of violence, how many of the perpetrators are African American or Hispanic, and it's often the majority. And so I think we literally need to sit down with editors and say, this is incorrect. We need to force them to see us in a different light, because I don't think they're going to do it voluntarily. Because the current model sells. You know, it's a business. It's the image, it's the stereotype. And so, and it isn't a matter of saying you should, in my opinion, you should do it because it's right, but you should do it because it's bad for business to portray people this way. We don't boycott anymore. Look, I'm not a politician. I'm not advocating anything one way or the other. But we have tremendous economic clout in this country, tremendous economic clout in this country. And, you know, there are ways to focus that people other than I are better at. But I think thought should be given in terms of how do we do that to impact these particular engines of communication that are putting forth these images. That's one way of thinking of it.
Okay. One more question? It's okay. You're a student?
Yeah.
Got to ask a question. Students gotta ask a question.
Hi, my name is Kalen Albert. I'm a master's student here at John Jay. So my question is, we all understand it's very important to build that bridge that Lloyd Seeley envisioned for the future. My question for you is, as a representative of the federal government, what can you do to sort of police misguided law enforcement initiatives that are misguided towards stereotyping, instead of acknowledging that, like, for example, terrorists can come from anywhere. They can come from, you know, the IRA. They can come from white supremacist groups. they can literally be anyone. And then, also things like the myth of the hip-hop cops within the NYPD or things like that. It'd be surprising if there was like, country cops or something that looked at the country industry or the rave scene with the rave music artists. So my question is, as a representative of the federal government, what can you do to police, misguided law enforcement initiatives?
Well, what I will say is that as the federal law enforcement officer for my district, my role isn't so much as to police other law enforcement departments as it is to work with them. And so what I do is I've tried to establish a positive working relationship with the police commissioners in all my counties, and that includes NYPD, but also going out to Nassau and Suffolk, which have a different set of issues there. And so I offer assistance. I offer funds for training through the Department of Justice. I offer grant assistance. I can't personally authorize it, but I can let them know about grants for community-oriented policing services, for officer training on firearms, sort of the shoot, don't shoot techniques, community relations training. We're offering that in the Suffolk County area now because, again, I mentioned they've had a number of issues dealing with this, with the death of this young Ecuadorian man. So I view my role as, and I think I'm more effective if I work with a local police department to provide them the help to expand their view so they can see what they're missing and see where they might not be on the right track or something, as opposed to sort of coming in to try and impose my view on them. One of the problems with our current budget cycle, very frankly, is that a lot of the funding for grants for state and local law enforcement is severely shrinking. And that's going to be a problem because it's not just in terms of community training, but we provide bulletproof vests for local law enforcement across the country. We provide training in important safety measures as well. So there's a concern that as our budget shrinks nationally, those efforts may be curtailed. But that's the main way in which I do that, is I try and have a collaborative relationship with all my federal agencies, state, local agencies, and say, how can I help? How can I help you either do this better, or how can I help you get the information that might be useful to you in doing this better?
We have time for one last question.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good evening.
My name is Lloyd. I am a police officer here in New York City. Actually, I work on the Brooklyn North. My question is more toward the kids within my specific precinct or specific environment. I work in Bed-Stuy. And I notice that I work different hours, and I notice after certain hours, the kids are on the street. I understand mom and dad probably at work, school, doing certain things. And I understand the most time you get some kid that get involved in some kind of crime is because there's no parents, there's no supervision, and then, there's nothing to do. So they're forced to be on the street with their friends. What, as I would say, first line in this fight, not against the kids, but the fight against crime, how can we support some kind of project or any kind of program that's available to help those kids find a better way?
Yeah, I think that certainly is a vital problem. And again, I think, as I mentioned before, the lack of funding is difficult because there used to be, the PALS not PALS, but yes. Yes, it was PAL. Yeah, I'm thinking there's PALS and there's PAL because the kids on my street used to play that as well. And I think that may not be as active. And whenever you try and have midnight basketball, people say, "How dare you give anything to these kids?" And so I think that unfortunately a lot of us who like you who are on the front lines, you're often in a very similar situation as many teachers today. They end up going into their own pockets, and they certainly end up spending their own time to try and find a child. And what may happen is that you are not going to be able to affect as large a group of children as you would if you had a program, but maybe you can adopt the one and enlist people to help do some sort of program where they come by the precinct and meet people and do things like that. Because it's hard, and the real challenge is, how do we do this without the funding that we all used to have? That really is the challenge. And I don't have an easy answer for you on that, because I have to wish you tremendous luck with that. And I think, though, that if you reach out to some of these kids, I will tell you one of the things that we have that we often don't think about that's very attractive to kids is the law enforcement tools that we all use. Last year, as part of the department's Arab and Muslim outreach efforts, the FBI sponsored an outreach program for Arab and Muslim youth, and they invited a number of different schools. And the children ranged from very small, like literally 5 years old, up to high school. And they had tables with handouts, and they had the pens, and they had all kinds of talks. What did the kids flock to? The police dog, and the table with the bulletproof vest, and the gun that was taken apart. But the reality is, kids are fascinated by what we do. They're fascinated by the tools of the trade. Now, obviously, you're not going to give a firearm to a child, but you can invite the kids in. You can invite the canine unit over. You know, these were kids who just did not. These were kids who did not know that there were police dogs. And it was fascinating to them. So sometimes some of the things that we sort of take for granted are really fascinating to kids.
Professor.
You may have addressed this question already. I have a slightly different take on police work, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a police officer and I've never acted as one on TV. And most officers never pull their gun, never fire their weapon. And 96.2% of what they do is social work. They negotiate, they calm situations up, they take care of people. So I'm just wondering, is there an ethos in an era of reduced crime and a sensibility that talking to people, humanizing one's interaction with people is a very important way of not just preventing crime, but fostering a different way of thinking of the police? Is there money for that? Is that something that one gets promoted for doing? Because I think we've pushed the bulletproof vests and the bullets and the stun guns and the tasers as far as it can go. And we're hearing from people like the CIA, who are no grandmas, that sitting down and talking to quote terrorists gets you more information than waterboarding them. So I'm just wondering, in the pantheon of police goals, where does that fit in the 21st century?
Well, you know, I think every police department is different, but I do think that the community policing model that we were speaking of earlier relies very heavily on exactly that. And I think it relies very heavily on trying to make that human connection between those who are policed, which is us, and those who do the policing, which is also us in many instances. And that's where you do find the most effective relationships. Some of the problems that people sometimes point to with that is they say, well, how do you measure how effective that is? You know, do you look at crime data? What statistics do you look at to see is that working? And my view is it really isn't something that can be measured because crime falls for a lot of reasons. Community policing is one of the reasons that it falls, but it also falls for changes in the schools. It falls for, you know, it's certain, I may remove a gang from a particular area and it may fall, it may spike. So I think we have to sort of get away from saying that we have to have a number to label a program a success. That's one thing. The program like the one that you're speaking about, where there's more of the interpersonal connection between a law enforcement officer and a member of the community, because that's the success is, you know, that both of them have their mind view expanded, both of them learn something about the other, both of them now see the other as human as opposed to, you know, a member of this group or a member of this force. Is there money for that? There often is. The Department of Justice does have a lot of grants. As I've mentioned, those unfortunately have been shrinking. But the program called Community Orienting Policing Services, or COPS, is the main area, is the main funnel through which those funds go. And it goes to support efforts by police departments across the country, not just for the vests and the training, but for the community training, but, you know, the relationship building training and the like as well.
Okay, Your Honor, one thing about John Jay and Noble, we know how to say thank you to our speakers. So I need you up here again, please, if you might. Thank you. And I'll also ask Dean of Students, Dean Edwards, to join me here, as well as President of the New York chapter of Noble. First, if I might, on behalf of Noble, we'd like to present you with a plaque that is a picture of Lloyd Seeley. It's a picture that we're proud of in that you may not see his face, but you know it's him. It's a picture of him up in Harlem speaking to a young African-American girl during a tough time in Harlem, during the Harlem riots, and he was known for his style and his demeanor as it relates to community policing. So with this plaque, it says, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, Noble, Justice by Action, which is our motto. The New York chapter of Noble presents this award to the Honorable Loretta Lynch, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, for your words and support of the annual Lloyd G. Seeley Lecture Series, dated February 8th, 2012. All right, thank you.
10-10.
Wait, want to slide this way?
Come on, sir.
Okay, and now I'll ask Dean Edwards to join us at the microphone for his presentation for John Jay College.
Thank you so much. I would like to once again thank you for joining us this evening. This was a wonderful opportunity to hear your thoughts, and the questions asked obviously showed that people were soaking it in, and so I think that's wonderful for all of us. And on behalf of Vice President Berenicia Johnson-Eanes, our Vice President of Student Affairs, I would like to offer this token of appreciation for you. No, it's not the Hope Diamond, but you know, but it's memorable. So I'd like to thank you and present this to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Can we get a picture with this too?
Sure.
All right. Yes, absolutely. Actually, what I'll do is I'll take it out for this, and it has the John Jay on the inside, suspended.
Thank you so much.
Okay, as we close, I'd like to thank the Lloyd Seeley Lecture Committee. There's a committee behind all this. This just doesn't just happen. So the committee, which including myself, includes Vice President of Student Development, Berenicia Eanes, who is not here tonight, and Dean Edwards is here representing her. The Chief of Staff to President Jeremy Travis, Office of the President, Ms. Lisa Galloway. Wave your hand. And our faculty representatives, you've heard from both of them, coincidentally. Professor Dolores Jones-Brown and Professor Jama Adams. He's still here? Sir, yes, thank you. Sure, we're going to get a picture with the speaker. We'll take that. See, I told you there's a committee behind this. Before I close, also, let me say thank you for the 20th Precinct Explorers who are here. You see them in the back. Thank you for joining us.